I really appreciate you listening to the podcast here. Let's go get started. It's Monday, August 5th. It's my unbirthday. In this family, your half birthday is your unbirthday. And since Katie was born in the summertime, she always had an unbirthday in January. So today's my unbirthday, which means as an Aquarian, I hang out with Leos. And yes, I give you all the space. Leos get all the space this month, right? That's what they're there for. Anyway, August 5th, and it's still summer, if you can believe it, although I heard school's starting again soon. Holy cow, I'm glad I wasn't that kid. I barely could do it when we went back in September. This week, I thought we would take a look at the legal system that surrounds our elections. These are the laws and the rules and activities that protect our elections. And that includes the Federal Election Commission and some other key players that are ensuring we have integrity during our democratic process. So just to paint the brush broadly, we all know at the end of the 2020 elections, all hell broke loose, and we had someone who didn't want to accept the peaceful transfer of power. That is, for those of us who are Democrat Republicans all the way back to the olden days, but those of us who believe in this whole process, that peaceful transfer of power is everything. And you can't be a loser and cry. You got to suck it up. That's part of, if you have enough cojones to run for the office, you need to have enough cojones I don't know why when I say that in Spanish, it's somehow not a bad word. You have to have the same ones that allow you to be a loser, a decent, acceptable, grown-up loser. It happens. That's how this whole race works. Somebody wins, somebody loses. So anyway, protecting that peaceful transfer of power is everything. And so there's a lot of work going on behind the scenes. So one of the themes here, of course, in this podcast is that democracy is a living organism. It's constantly changing and adapting to how our culture, how our laws, how our science, how everything changes. It has to. There's just no way 200 years ago these men could understand what was going to happen and how the world would change. And frankly, how amazing as a society we are in terms of science and discoveries and just amazing things. So we're fighting for our living, breathing democracy. And I'm going to talk about some coverage that happened in the last couple of weeks. And it actually started last March. But it really tells the story of why we have to fight for our democracy. So in March of 2024, so just a few months ago, Rolling Stone published an in-depth investigation into the pro-Trump election deniers. Now, this is important. These are the election deniers. I want to really be careful here because you're going to hear me talk about, I'm going to name names, and it's really around Trump election deniers. This is a subset of people who, in my mind, have lost their minds, but also they've been bombarded with so much propaganda. And if you don't have critical thinking skills, it's really easy to believe what you're told. I mean, we kind of all, as people in our generations, have grown up with TV, and when the newscasters say something, at least for a bunch of us, it was true. I believe this started to change with the millennials, and it's for sure not true with Gen Z. They don't trust anybody. I mean, we built it and we screwed it up, and they don't trust anybody. But generally, we all used to trust what we heard on TV. So it makes sense to me that a lot of people, if they are not seeking new information, might believe some of this. It doesn't make it right, but you kind of get, I'm a messaging person, right? I care about rhetoric. I get the power of messaging. So this Rolling Stone article talked about the Trump election deniers in particular, who may refuse to certify accurate election results. So they're just going to say, no, we're not certifying. They kind of can. I mean, they can't, but they kind of can. So let's go into this. The issue is crucial because it can disrupt the certification of statewide results, which means, and that has a really far-reaching implication. It just means that you could be the cog in the wheel that breaks everything. If this election denying, or the failure to certify, let's call it what it is, if the failure to certify happens in just one area of a roll-up, one cog in the wheel ain't going to grind, ain't going to move forward, then you have shut down the process for the whole state, the whole state's electors. So it's a brazen thing to do, and it it takes a lot of you-know-whats. So Mark Elias, I don't know if you've been exposed to Mark Elias. I personally hold him in the highest regard. He is everything I was taught a lawyer should be. He uses the law to advance society. He uses the law to protect the little guy. He advocates for all of us in the most principled way. And so you can, there are really kind of two kinds of people, and this is very broad brush, so don't go crazy here. But there are people that are inclined to argue from a principled standpoint, meaning it's just the right thing to do. That's kind of the statement. It's the right thing to do. But there's also the kind of people who make their decisions based on reading the room. These are also very, I am a principled person, much to my detriment very often, because I'm not good at sometimes reading the room, or I don't give a you know what. So when you think about this, what Mark's done in his integrity and his characters all have been about doing the right thing. And I really, really like Mark Elias. Plus, he has like the best dog. Come on. I mean, when somebody's got a good dog, you know, just they're a decent person. Anyway, Mark is a highly respected legal expert, and he shared his concerns in the Rolling Stone article. And what he said is that we're going to see mass refusals to certify elections because the Republicans are counting on the fact that if they don't certify in several small counties, you cannot certify statewide results. And this is a challenge they've encountered before. He's seen it because he litigates a lot of this stuff, but it's something we need to continue to address. So this story, I mentioned it started in March. It kind of didn't get a lot of play. It's a Rolling Stone knocks out some very good, deep articles on topics. In fact, I was working with a Rolling Stone reporter on the D'Angelo case, on the murder. So I got to meet like an amazing Rolling Stone reporter, and I love her. And she does look across. The way they approach their articles is very. I just feel like they pull together a lot of threads. It's comprehensive. That's the word I'm looking for. So anyway, this article came out in March, but then last week, Rachel Maddow discussed the article on her show. Now, you may or may not like Rachel Maddow, but I will tell you that one of the things I do appreciate about her reporting is she's a Rhodes Scholar, and she tends to tap history. I almost feel like she's almost like a Michael Beschloss, but as a journalist. You know, she goes in and looks at the history and looks for the connections to now. How can we learn from what's happened in the past to what we do now? So when she dives deep into something, she tries to bring out all aspects of the story and what it really means in the context of our history. So her reporting on what's going on with these electors finally got traction because she reported on it. And people started asking and reaching out to Democracy.gov about what's going on and what can we do. And Mark's biggest thing is that this isn't new. This has been going on for a few years now, and we know what we're doing. But yeah, for sure, we need the help. During the 2020 election, just so you know, this isn't new. The Republicans and the election deniers, the Republicans, that was by the Republican Party. This was sponsored by the party, so that's why it's really important to know. Attempted to subvert the results in Michigan by pressuring GOP members of the Wayne County Canvassing Board to vote against certifying the elections results in Detroit. The situation was so serious that it involved direct calls from Donald Trump and then RNC chair Ronna McDaniel. Now, when I tell you this little quote, because this is from a story that I cite, I have links to all this in the companion blog, but on the call, and this is what made me remember it. Trump said, "We've got to fight for our country." Yes, you are being spared my Trump imitation because I literally don't have one. So I'll just say it like a loud man. "We have got to fight for our country," Trump told two members of the Wayne County Board canvassers. This is his call to them on the phone. That he was talking to Monica Palmer and William Hartman shortly after the board met about certifying the results. Trump finished, "We can't let these people take our country away from us." Okay, link to the whole story. You can go in and revisit that lovely time in 2020 that all of us just wish we saw in our rearview mirror. Ultimately, we're really lucky that that effort was unsuccessful. And that helped establish some of the legal work and scrutiny that was going to be required to hold these kinds of people accountable. In 2021, Mark Elias had warned us about the need to reform the certification process, but It hasn't happened yet. And he has actually proposed several steps, which is pretty cool. And this week we're going to talk about all this stuff, and I'm going to try to make sure it's interesting and juicy and has a little bit of gossip, so it's kind of fun. But it's really important to understand these layers. So this is a legal process, and his reforms in 2021 didn't come to pass. We know why. We have a divided Senate. Not Senate. We have a divided Congress. We have people who just want to block everything. So it's interesting to me that they want to block everything, even the things for democracy. But right now, unfortunately, the GOP has convinced themselves that if they let everybody vote, they won't win. And that is causing them to want to do other things to block the process. So the tactics came up again in 2022. Again, got a link for you, where 10 counties, including 4 in Pennsylvania, refused to certify. And this pattern was something that caused more concern, and that's 2022. So those are those are not presidential elections. Those are usually the Senate midterm elections, I think they call them. That's usually the Senate. Senate, Congress, House, a lot of judges. Sometimes we pick a lot of our state people in those cycles, in those midterm elections. But they were already hijinks going on in the midterms in 2022. So I was wondering, where's the Federal Election Commission in all of this? And you might be wondering too. The Federal Election Commission, called the FEC, is an independent regulatory agency whose primary role is to enforce campaign finance laws. Isn't that interesting? They oversee how money is raised and spent and ensure transparency in political campaign funding. We'll be back on this one when we talk a little bit more about the roles of political action committees and how they add money to this mess. The FEC does not have jurisdiction over the certification of election results or the conduct of local election officials. Now, this might be an absolute federal versus state situation. Again, we're going to look into this week because I need to know more too. I want to really be clear. Does that mean the FEC doesn't oversee any election, any finance requirements happening in the states? I need to know more. So we'll look into this. But the lack of involvement is why the work to protect election integrity, I'm sorry, let me start this over again. Election integrity itself, not the money, the election integrity, how the votes are counted, when it's certified, and all of that, is run by courts, state officials, and pro-democracy legal teams. The FEC's mandate is only on finance, and when there's a gap, that gap goes to the judiciary, the Department of Justice, the judiciary. So remember, there are 3 branches of government, and that's where these things are being decided, which is also means it's a human making these decisions, a judge, and not necessarily a set of rules. So we just don't have the damn rules. So here we are with a fewer of 100 days left to the election. It was today's day 93. And there's a noticeable shift in this strategy from some Republican groups, and they've redirected their efforts from traditional voter outreach. So remember when Trump said, we don't need your vote. You only need to vote one more time. You don't even need to vote for me. We got this. You don't even need to vote for me. They've directed their efforts from voter outreach to building a framework that would challenge election results. So let's go back to Rolling Stone. They came out with a new report on July 29th, just 2 weeks ago. And they are stating there are several swing state election officials who are still Trump election deniers. There are 70 pro-Trump conspiracists in key battleground counties, and they are election officials, and they are poised to make a giant mess on election day. And it's important for us to know, because this is going to affect how we engage and act with the electoral process in November. Everybody's taking action. Mark Elias is working hard on this. I have a link to his name and information in the companion blog, and he's working. He tweets all the time. He is on a lot of news shows. He's a very good representative of democracy law. And I encourage you to start to pay attention to his name, maybe follow. And the thing I would really encourage you to do is to follow him and his democracy docket. Democracy Docket, DOCKET, newsletter. It's a really good newsletter, and some of what I'll be sharing is from his newsletter, but it's also a good way for you just to learn. If you're interested in this is a great way to learn about it. In fact, you could even do it if you have kids. You could find some stuff in there and talk to kids about it. It's a great way to see where they come down on how they think about things, and if they are using principle or if they're reading the room, if they're trying to please you, or if they're actually thinking it through, like, well, what would the right answer be? That's a good discussion. So we cannot rely solely on the courts and officials. We all have to be involved here. And that's why your role here is to listen, get educated about stuff you may have, like I said, I was like this one, the things you might have forgotten, or that I'm helping you remember, or you never knew, or now that you know, it's really interesting. You just want to know more because now it means something to you. That's how we learn. We tend to learn better when the stuff we're learning is relevant to our experience. It just writes to our hard disk better in our brains if the information is relevant. So even when you're sharing with someone else, if you can make it relevant for them, it'll absolutely stick way better than it normally would. I want you to consider working as a poll worker or working on a campaign. There are a lot of very, very good people that have signed up. I know in California, they've been asking people to volunteer in any ways just to keep our elections safe and secure and unencumbered by nonsense. So those are some ways that you can get involved. And if you are undecided still in this election, and probably we should talk, but we don't have to. But if you are undecided, there's some important things for you to consider just in how you manage yourself in our democracy. We want everybody to have a right to vote for whomever they want. That's just an American promise, let's face it. And we even started that badly because we had women unable to vote and we had Black men at 3/5. Like, what the heck? My brain doesn't even know how to figure these things out, how convoluted, how hard we trip over ourselves instead of just being fair. It's amazing how hard we will work. Like this whole podcast is about people working to subvert our elections. How hard is that? I have an idea. Run a good campaign. Offer people what they want to hear. See how people are struggling. Think of things that would make a difference that costs us nothing. I'm going to just say it, like free lunches for all kids in schools. Why would we not want them to be nourished so they could learn? Why? That just doesn't make sense to me. Instead, we got to run around and make everything super hard. It's not hard. This is not hard, people. There are so many things that are not hard. So that's it. I'm going to get off my soapbox. That's really my soapbox about getting involved. Getting involved, care about this deeply. And tomorrow we'll talk a bit more about how these rules, regulations, and laws layer over and leave gaps. And we'll probably look at that this week. We also, I think, are expecting a BP announcement. I've chosen to let that roll because, let's face it, I can't do a damn thing about it. So it's going to be what it's going to be, but I'm prepared to get behind whatever that is. And I'm prepared to talk to you tomorrow more about your civic involvement in our upcoming election. Thanks for listening. Be sure to share the podcast too. I'm finding that a lot of people are discovering it in weird ways. And if you share it, I would really appreciate it because I am getting some listeners. This is really exciting for me. It's cool to feel powerful as you sit at your desk in your messy house in Santa Cruz, California. Have a great day. Thank you for listening to today's podcast. Make sure you subscribe and rate, and I'll be back with another episode really soon.